After conquering Egypt, North Africa, Persia, and parts of Europe, the Umayyads had reached the borders of India. Sindh fell within a few years. The rest of India should have fallen too, but it didn't. For the next 20 years, one of the fastest growing empires in history couldn't push deeper into the subcontinent. It was not stopped by a single king or one great battle. Instead, it ran into kingdoms that refused to surrender, kingdoms that refused to fall. At the center of that resistance stood the Gurjara-Pratiharas. The word Pratihara literally means gatekeeper. In the 8th century, that name would prove remarkably fitting. To understand why they mattered, we first need to understand the empire marching towards India. By the beginning of the 8th century, the Umayyad Caliphate was arguably the most powerful state on earth. Its territory stretched from the Atlantic Ocean to the borders of India. Within decades, Arab armies had destroyed the Sasanian Empire, seized vast Byzantine territories, and pushed across North Africa into Iberia. The speed was astonishing. Each conquest funded the next. New lands meant new revenue. New revenue meant new armies. New armies meant new conquests. Momentum itself became a weapon. To anyone watching at the time, this expansion must have looked unstoppable. Before we go further, it's worth understanding exactly what this empire could field. The Umayyad military machine had become one of the most feared fighting forces in the world. Its cavalry could cross enormous distances at remarkable speed. Its commanders carried decades of battlefield experience. Its siege engines could bring down city walls with ease. And now, the same force stood at India's doors. In 711, the young general Muhammad ibn Qasim crossed into Sindh. The campaign moved fast. Debal, modern-day Karachi, fell. Cities along the Indus submitted one after another. Raja Dahir was defeated in battle. Within a few years, Sindh had been absorbed into the Umayyad world. From a distance, it looked like just another conquest, the first step towards something much larger. Then the momentum vanished. In 715, Muhammad ibn Qasim was recalled and soon died in captivity. Political turmoil back in the empire's capital weakened its grip on the frontier. Some cities that had submitted were retaken by the kings of Sindh. For now, the expansion had stalled, but the pause wouldn't last. In the 720s, a new governor arrived in Sindh, Junaid ibn Abd al-Rahman. He restored Umayyad authority, recovered lost territory, and began preparing a far larger offensive. Arab armies pushed towards Rajasthan, Gujarat, and the regions around Punjab. For the first time since the conquest of Sindh, a deeper advance into India looked possible again. Pressure built on multiple fronts at once. One of those routes led directly towards the land of Gurjara-Pratiharas. Their ruler was a man named Nagabhata. History tells us frustratingly little about Nagabhata's early life. We don't know the battles he fought as a young man. We don't know how he was trained. What we do know is that when the Umayyads came knocking, he was already ruling one of the most important kingdoms in Western India. But what matters most is where he ruled. His kingdom sat on some of the most strategically important ground in Western India, centered around Ujjain in Malwa, a region wedged between the deserts of Rajasthan, the rich plains of central India, and the trade routes leading west towards Sindh. To the east lay the wealthy heartlands of northern India. Any force trying to push inland from Sindh would have to pass through the territory controlled by Nagabhata or his contemporaries. He was the kind of ruler whose decisions were shaped as much by geography as by his politics. And unlike a governor sitting in some distant capital, he didn't need reports to tell him that the danger was already on his doorstep. But recognizing a threat and defeating it are two very different things. The Umayyads commanded one of the most powerful military machines in the world. So why did the frontier hold? Military power is never measured only in number of soldiers. Geography matters, logistics matters, and in Western India, both these factors favored the defenders. Nagabhata and the Gurjara-Pratiharas had three advantages that no empire could simply transport across a continent. Distance was the first. Every Arab soldier marching east had to be supplied from bases hundreds of kilometers away across the Thar Desert. Every Pratihara soldier, by contrast, was fighting close to home. Their supply lines were shorter, their reinforcements arrived faster, their commanders knew the ground. Local knowledge was the second factor. The deserts of Rajasthan were not empty wasteland. They were a landscape understood intimately by the people who lived there. Where the water was, which routes the caravans used, how the weather shifted, where the ground favored a defender. Knowing these things could decide whether an army survived or perished. Speed was the third. The Pratiharas understood that speed could only be answered with speed. Their cavalry patrolled the borders, shadowing enemy movements and striking wherever supply lines ran thin. Across the open landscapes of western India, these horsemen became the eyes, ears, and striking fist of Nagabhata's defense. Arab chroniclers, writing generations later, would still describe the Gurjara-Pratihara cavalry as among the finest in India. Perhaps the greatest advantage of all was political. Nagabhata wasn't fighting alone in unfamiliar territory the way the Ummayyads were. He was surrounded by rulers who understood exactly what was at stake. Even without formal alliances, kingdom after kingdom had its own reasons to resist. The Ummayyads were trying to project power across an enormous distance. The Pratiharas and their neighbors were defending their homes. Throughout history, that difference has often decided wars on its own. The farther the Umayyads advanced, the harder the campaign became. Every offensive depended on supply lines stretching back through Sindh. Every setback demanded fresh reinforcements. Every defeat burned through resources that had once seemed endless. Distance became an enemy. Terrain became an enemy. Time became an enemy. Conquests that had once seemed effortless in Persia, in Egypt, in North Africa had suddenly become expensive in India. The age of rapid eastern expansion was over. The frontier had held. But this was never the story of one man. Across western India, resistance was forming on all fronts. Popular history loves to look for one decisive battle, one hero, one moment that changed everything. Reality is almost always messier than that. The Umayyad advance ran into resistance across several regions at once. Nagabhata blocked the routes in the north and northeast. Farther south, the Chalukyas answered with a force of their own. At the Battle of Navsari, Chalukya forces under the general Pulakeshi defeated an Arab army pushing through Gujarat. Bappa Rawal held the hills of Mewad. Lalit Aditya was not just guarding the north, he led an offensive against the Umayyads. Together, their stories reveal something larger. No single battle ended the invasion. No single king turned the tide. Instead, the Umayyads encountered something far harder to break, a frontier that fought back everywhere, a network of kingdoms that refused to collapse. And at the center of the northern resistance stood Nagabhata. Today, he is far less famous than many of the rulers who came after him, but his significance lies precisely in what didn't happen. His territory never became another province of the Umayyad world. The frontier didn't break. The advance didn't continue. The Gurjara-Pratiharas would go on to become one of the great powers of northern India. But Nagabhata's greatest achievement may have been simpler than any of that. He held the line at the exact moment one of history's most successful expansionist empires was still searching for its next conquest. History tends to remember the people who build empires, the ones who conquer, but rarely it happens that the people who matter most are the ones who stop a conquest, the ones who deny an empire its next victory, the ones who simply hold the line. Sometimes, changing the course of history doesn't require conquering the world, it simply requires refusing to yield.